You think if someone just loved you enough, deeply enough, completely enough, everything would finally feel okay. The chaos inside you would stop. The doubts would go silent. The fear would vanish. You'd finally rest. That's the dream, right? To be held so completely, so unquestionably, that the brokenness in you no longer matters. That someone would look at your flaws and not flinch. That they'd understand you so fully you'd never have to explain again. That they'd love you in a way no one ever has. Fiercely, endlessly, loyally. And because of that love, you'd finally feel safe. But what if that dream is the thing killing you? Not softly, not slowly, but silently. Like a drug you keep injecting, hoping this time it works. Because here's the truth. No one will ever love you enough to make you feel safe. Not because love isn't real, but because what you're calling love is a search for protection. You don't want connection. You want control over your pain. You want insurance against abandonment. You want to outsource the responsibility of your inner world to someone else. And that's not love. That's a hostage negotiation with your trauma. You've built your emotional survival plan around being chosen, around being seen, around being needed. You've made someone else's affection your shelter, your last defense against the void. But real safety doesn't come from love. It comes from capacity. The capacity to be alone and not shatter, to be rejected and not collapse, to be misunderstood and not unravel, to be loved and not lose yourself. That's what no one teaches you. You don't need to be more loved. You need to be more intact. Niccolò Machiavelli said, "It is much safer to be feared than loved." He wasn't talking about romance. He was talking about control. Because love can be withdrawn. Love can be manipulated. Love can be performed. Love is fragile, especially when you crave it, especially when you need it to feel like you matter. And when your sense of worth depends on being loved, you will accept anything that looks like it. Even if it costs your self-respect, even if it hurts, even if it breaks you. Because you've decided that the pain of being unloved is worse than the pain of betrayal. You'd rather stay than risk being alone. You'd rather shrink than risk being too much. You'd rather tolerate than walk away. Because somewhere deep in you, you still believe that if you're finally loved right, all of this will stop hurting. But Nietzsche would call that a slave morality, a system of values built on submission, on need, on the hope that salvation comes from outside, that someone else will make the pain make sense, that someone else will see your worth and hand it back to you. He'd tell you, love is not consolation, it is light, which means this: love is not supposed to rescue you, it's supposed to reveal you. And if being loved makes you disappear, if you have to be less angry, less intense, less emotional, less you to keep it, then it's not love, it's a transaction. A contract you signed out of fear. You want safety? Stop tying it to someone else's ability to stay. Because no one stays forever. People leave, people change, people love you in ways that feel like knives and call it devotion. And if your peace is built on their presence, your life is one step from collapse. That's the prison you live in. And the most brutal part? You built it. With hope, with softness, with open hands. You thought it was a garden. You didn't notice the bars. You can blame others for the way they love you, or don't. You can tell stories about how unavailable they are, how selfish, how wounded. But if you keep handing your sense of safety to people who can't even hold their own, that's on you. Machiavelli would say, never depend on the loyalty of someone who benefits from your weakness. Think about that. If someone only loves you when you're small, quiet, agreeable, if someone pulls away when you grow, when you say no, when you stop begging, if someone disappears when you no longer perform, that's not love, that's use. And you agreed to it because you were starving. But hunger doesn't mean you eat anything. Desperation doesn't mean you let anyone in. Fear doesn't get to decide your standards. You are not a child anymore. Your wounds are real, but they're not your compass. Your longing is valid, but it doesn't get to drive. Your ache for connection is human, but it cannot replace your backbone. You will never be loved enough to be safe. Not because love isn't powerful, but because safety doesn't come from being held. It comes from no longer needing to be. But need is seductive, especially the emotional kind. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It wraps itself around your language, around your expectations, around your idea of who you are in someone's life. You tell yourself it's love, that you're loyal, that you're devoted, but underneath, it's dependency. It's fear, it's, please don't leave me, I don't know who I am without you. And people can feel that, even the ones who say they love you. They may not name it, but they'll test it. They'll pull back just enough to see if you chase. They'll withhold just enough to watch you perform. They'll offer crumbs, and you'll call it a feast. Because when you're starving, attention feels like intimacy. But here's what no one wants to admit. The more you need love, the easier you are to control. This is why you tolerate the distance, the mixed signals, the inconsistency, the moments when your body says leave, but your history says stay. Because you're not staying out of love, you're staying out of fear that if this ends, you'll be alone with yourself. And you don't know how to survive that. So you let your worth be decided by someone else's emotional weather. One day you're adored, the next you're invisible. And you adjust every time, quietly, gratefully, desperately. Machiavelli would say, men are driven by two things, love and fear. But if you must choose, rule through fear because it lasts longer. Now flip that. If you are ruled by the fear of losing love, you are not free. You're governable, you're predictable, you're obedient. And obedience doesn't build intimacy, it builds imbalance. Because the moment someone realizes you'll stay no matter what, they stop trying. Not always out of cruelty, sometimes out of human nature. When love is guaranteed, it's devalued. When presence is unconditional, it's abused. This is the part you don't want to hear. That your devotion is being used against you. That your tenderness is the currency of your own captivity. That your goodness doesn't protect you, it exposes you. You want to believe that if you love hard enough, long enough, purely enough, you'll be safe. That they'll see it. That they'll finally treat you how you deserve. But you're not being rewarded. You're being drained. Because they know, consciously or not, that your fear of losing them is stronger than your will to protect yourself. So they take, and you give. They withdraw. You reach. They silence. You over-explain. And that dance, that degrading, exhausting, addictive dance, becomes your normal. You call it love. But it's survival dressed in longing. Nietzsche would say, "He who cannot obey himself will be commanded." And that's exactly what's happening. You've handed your emotional autonomy over, not just to a person, to a fantasy. The fantasy of being chosen, the fantasy of being enough for someone to stay, the fantasy of being seen so deeply that all your wounds finally make sense. But fantasies don't protect you. They expose you to manipulation, to disappointment, to erosion, and most dangerously, they delay the inevitable. You will have to hold yourself, no matter how much someone else tries, no matter how many promises they make, no matter how long they stay. They cannot carry your pain. They cannot heal what you haven't faced. They cannot love you into wholeness. That work is yours, and until you do it, love will always feel fragile, unsafe. Not because it is, but because you are still tying your survival to someone else's presence. This is the paradox. The more you crave safety through love, the more unsafe you become. Because now you're blind to red flags. You call manipulation passion. You call distance mystery. You call emotional unavailability complexity. Anything to keep the hope alive that this time will be different. But it won't. Not until you choose differently. Not until you stop waiting to be rescued and start respecting your own boundaries. Not until you stop bargaining for worth and start building inner gravity. Not until you stop chasing love as shelter and start seeing it as mirror. Because real love, the kind that lasts, is not built on desperation. It's built on mutual recognition. And recognition cannot happen when one person is shrinking to fit the other's comfort. You want to be safe? Then start by being dangerous to your old patterns. Because the moment you say, "I don't need to be loved to be whole," everything changes. but only after the collapse, only after the myth dies. Because whether you admit it or not, you've been waiting for something impossible, unconditional love in a conditional world. You say you're looking for connection, but really, you're looking for restoration. You want someone to see you fully, gently, without expectation, and choose you every time, no matter what, like a parent was supposed to. That's the part of you still stuck, the child, the ache, the unmet need disguised as romance. And let's be honest, it's not about them, it's about you. You want to be loved in a way that rewrites history. You want someone to hold you with such clarity that the past becomes irrelevant, that the pain disappears, that the questions stop. But no one can give you that, because love is not therapy. It is not a time machine. It is not redemption. It's presence. It's choice. It's risk. And if you're not ready to risk being unseen, misunderstood, left, you're not ready to love. Because love will not heal you. It will reveal you. And what it reveals might be worse than loneliness, your dependence, your passivity, your unresolved grief, your undeclared self-betrayal. That's why so many people run from real intimacy. It forces a confrontation with the self. And when you've been living for decades as a version of yourself tailored for approval, facing the raw, unfiltered you is terrifying. But until you do, you will never stop outsourcing your sense of safety. You will confuse attention with affection. You will confuse sacrifice with love. You will confuse possession with connection. And you'll keep getting hurt, not because the world is cruel, but because you are still playing out a fantasy that someone else will fix what only you can face. Machiavelli never believed in ideals. He believed in outcomes, power, leverage, self-reliance. He would have looked you in the eye and said, "Stop waiting for the world to love you. Make yourself necessary. Then they'll never leave." And maybe that sounds cold. Maybe it feels too strategic. But ask yourself, how many times have you been discarded after giving everything? How many times have you played soft, patient, forgiving, only to be forgotten? Because you were not needed. You were optional. Because your love was abundant, but your self-possession was absent. Now Nietzsche enters the room and strips even that away. He tells you, he who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. But if your why is to be loved, you are already lost. You must become your own necessity. You must become your own answer, not because others don't matter, but because you will not survive being dependent on their care. And yes, it's lonely at first. When the illusion fades, the silence is brutal. You realize how many people you allowed to stay just because they stayed. You see the patterns, you feel the holes, you sit with the ache. But then something strange happens. You don't die. You feel the pull to text them. You don't. You want to explain yourself. You don't. You start crying for no clear reason. And still, you breathe, because something in you is shifting, not as a defense, not as numbness, as structure, as self. Not the self shaped for acceptance. The self that remains when the audience leaves, the one that doesn't need to be clapped for, the one that isn't waiting to be rescued, the one that doesn't beg for clarity. That self doesn't need to be loved to feel safe. Because they know safety isn't love, it's sovereignty. When you reach this place, the way you love changes. You no longer fall for potential. You no longer sacrifice stability for intensity. You no longer wait for someone to understand you before you respect yourself. You give, but never to prove. You stay, but never to avoid being alone. You open, but never at the cost of your spine. And when someone does love you, truly, it won't be because you collapsed into them. It will be because you stood on your own, because you were already enough without them. And they saw it, and wanted to walk beside it, not complete it. That was all you ever needed, but you couldn't see it, not back then. Because everything in your body, your memories, your training, told you otherwise. Told you that love is a contract, that love is earned, that love is security, that love is the thing that makes the fear go away. So you spent years chasing it, begging for it, performing for it, sculpting yourself to be wanted, hoping someone would see all the places you were bleeding and offer a clean hand. And they did. Some stayed a while. Some said the right things. Some held you, not knowing they were only wrapping their arms around your ache. And when they left, or changed, or failed you in ways you couldn't unsee, the story repeated. If I had just been better, if I hadn't said that, if I was easier to love. But now you know, it was never about being lovable. It was about where you placed your sense of self. You handed it over, like currency, hoping someone would exchange it for permanence. And permanence never came. Because no one, no matter how loving, kind, intuitive, or devoted, can carry the weight of what you refuse to hold yourself. You used love like scaffolding to build around the parts of you didn't want to collapse. But now you see, it's not the other that keeps you from falling. It's presence, it's self-recognition, it's enoughness without condition. That realization doesn't arrive with fireworks. It's quiet, almost disappointing at first, because it's not dramatic. No grand revelation, no cathartic scream, just stillness and something inside you whispering, I'm still here, even without them. And slowly, the need dissolves, the need to be picked, the need to be missed, the need to be adored. You stop scanning for signs. You stop interpreting silences. You stop performing for closeness. Instead, you become close to yourself in a way you didn't think was possible, not because it's comfortable, but because it's finally real. And this changes everything. It changes who you trust, who you invite in, who you allow to see the raw edges. You're no longer impressed by intensity, by attention, by charm. You're drawn to something deeper, steadiness, not perfection, but congruence, not fireworks, but firewood. You realize now, love is not the reward for your suffering. It's not the antidote to your childhood. It's not the cure for your insecurity. It's not owed to you because you've been through enough. It's a meeting between two whole people, not two halves hoping to become complete. And that wholeness, it isn't loud, it doesn't post itself online, it doesn't need to be declared, it just is. So when someone new appears, you don't reach for them, you don't contort to keep them, you don't abandon your peace to feel wanted, you observe, you hold your shape, you let time do its work. You know now, anyone who needs you to become less so they can stay isn't staying with you. They're staying with a version of you that's easier to digest, to control, to place on a shelf. And you don't play that role anymore, not because you're guarded, but because you're rooted. Because now, the love you're willing to accept must match the love you've learned to give yourself. And when it doesn't, you don't explain, you don't plead, you don't beg to be seen. You simply step back, not to disappear, but to remain whole. That's what safety really looks like, not someone promising never to leave, but you no longer abandoning yourself to make them stay. Now you can walk away from what once paralyzed you. You can sit in silence with your own ache. You can meet disappointment without self-erasure. You can say no and not tremble. You can be misunderstood and remain grounded. You don't need to be loved to be safe anymore. You just need to be you, undiluted, unfolded, unapologetic. And for the first time, you are.